Yes.
Hello and welcome to Introduction to Universal Design for Learning. We're very excited to be here with you today. I have with me my partner, Dr. Amy Julian, the Director of the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And I'm Sarah Goldhammer from the Southern Illinois Professional Development Center. We couldn't be more excited to be joining up today to talk about Universal Design for Learning with you. So, Amy, can you go ahead and get us started?
Absolutely, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Forum for Excellence session. We're going to start off with a question. There's a lot of information out there on universal design, so we want to know, how well do you know UDL? So if you could post there in the chat box, do you, 1, not at all, 2, you're somewhat familiar with universal design, 3, you've had a training or 2, or 4, you could write a book. Please take a second and post that in the chat. And we are going to go ahead and move along, and we'll be chatting with you as we're presenting. Thanks. What we wanted to start with is a nice foundation of universal design for learning. And the term universal design for learning means a scientific valid framework for guiding educational practices. This is the definition that has come out of both the Perkins Law and the Higher Education Act. And what those laws say that UDL will do is provide flexibility in the ways information is presented, in the way students respond or demonstrate knowledge and skills, and in the way students are engaged. Universal design also is a mechanism to reduce barriers in instruction, provide appropriate accommodations, supports, and challenges, and maintains high achievement expectations for all students. There is a focus for students with disabilities, but as you're going to learn today, UDL is really something that supports all of our students.
All right, so one of the things that Amy and I want to do in this session is model for you UDL. So you get to have quite a bit of control over your environment today, which you'll see as we work through this session. That's one of the things that we want to provide for our learners is choices, access. And so one of the things that we've learned during the last 6 months is sometimes it's hard with virtual learning, that access can be hard, but on the other hand, sometimes it can provide access to people who haven't had it before. So let me point out to you some of the ways that you get to control your learning environment today. You can self-regulate. So literally you can sit anywhere that your Wi-Fi, that your device goes. You can stand or walk around as we're talking. You can sit in a comfy chair. Don't be too comfortable though, because we want you to be fully engaged. You can be eating your whatever meal, whatever snack you want, you can eat that. You can definitely be fidgeting and tapping your foot and all those things. The good news is you can do those things in a brick and mortar classroom, but you might be bothering somebody else. So just kind of letting you know that you have a lot of options for you. We have an agenda, what we're going to go through today. Amy's already encouraged you to put information in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can doodle over here. I would definitely encourage you also to take some notes. You have this PowerPoint, you have another handout, and we're going to be providing some links from you, a lot of resources. But I encourage you to start thinking about what do you want to take from this session to use with your learners. Thinking about what am I already doing that's UDL, because that will really help you to be fully engaged in this presentation. So we've got the self-regulation, we have actions, and we have how you perceive. So you have shared slides, you have a personal copy of the slides, and we're also closed captioning today. So there's lots of ways that you can be involved in this presentation. So our goals for the session today are we want to make sure that you have a clear overview of universal design for learning. Amy's already given you a definition, but we'll go through examples. And we're also going to explore the concept and implications of variability. What is variability? Why is it important? Why should we design for it? And we'll talk about that. And then also, largely, I know that educators want to know, what am I going to do with this? So what's the application of UDL in your classroom? I've already encouraged you to have your brain thinking about how am I going to use this, because that will really help you to interact. Be amazed and by how you engage with UDL every day. So I encourage you to start thinking about, how am I already using this? And I think you'll be really surprised and happy to see how many ways that you're already using it, and that'll help propel you forward to think about how else can I use it. And then lastly, Amy and I really want to make sure that at least once in this next hour you gasp, not for air, but gasp because you're so excited about the concepts that we're sharing, because that's how Amy and I feel about it. We're excited. We want to make sure that you laugh at least once and nod your head at least once, and hopefully 17 times in agreement with what we have to say. So those are our goals for our session today. Moving forward, everybody already knows about universal design. You've seen it in architecture. Buildings are ADA compliant. There's ramps, there are doors that you can push so that it opens for you. And you can probably think of a whole bunch of other examples of universal design in architecture. But the really amazing thing is neuroscience tells us that we need to design for variability in learners, not just in architecture, but also because every brain is different, and neuroscience shows us that. So to assume that everybody learns the same way, it just doesn't even make any sense. What makes sense is that we're all learning differently, and not only do we learn differently, but in different contexts, we learn differently. So it's very important to design for that. The good news is that we can prepare for variability and think about it as we are designing lessons, as we're engaging with our students and helping them to be the most effective learners as possible. So we want engagement and practice. How can we sustain effort and persistence with our students? If we have them engaged, then they're going to persist much longer than they would if they're not engaged. Another engagement and practice is we want to optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. And our ICAPS programs, whether you teach an ICAPS program or not, is a great example, though, of authenticity and relevance. And so we want to bring that into all of our classrooms to make sure that students understand the importance of what we're learning. And also, this is a key point, and this is a game changer for us, that if we can understand that the barrier is in the environment, not the learner, that changes everything. We have for years thought about the barrier, the disability, however you want to call it, is in the learner, but the barrier's in the environment. And that means if we change the environment, we can change the learning experience and the success rate for our students. So as we move forward, I want you to think about that UDL is not just a checklist. Did I do this? Did I do that? Those kinds of things. It's a new lens for thinking about everything that we do. It makes a difference about how we engage everywhere, about how we present information to everyone and in every situation. So I hope that we can think about that mental shift as Amy takes us forward, is that the barrier is in the environment, not the learner, and that UDL is a way of thinking about interacting with our environment. Oh, before I turn it over to Amy, let me give you one analogy that hopefully will help you with variability. And that's the dinner party analogy. I'm not sure if this picture on the screen is making you hungry or not. It kind of is me. So one of the things that you may or may not know about me, because I know some of you, I see some people out there that I know, but I love to cook. And I love to be a host in my home. Not that I've done that any time recently, but I would love for everybody to come to my house and have a dinner party. So let's just pretend that we could do that. We're in different times, and we can congregate with a large group of people. So if one of my goals, if you're coming to my house for a dinner party, is that you're well fed and that you're happy and satisfied. So I want you to think about for a moment with what you see on there. Let's say I'm going to make some Mexican lasagna. So is that going to make you happy? Are you going to be well fed with that? What do you think, Amy? Are you happy with my Mexican lasagna when you come to my house?
Well, Sarah, I think the picture looks delicious and it definitely looks very filling. However, I have a lactose issue, so that lovely brown cheese on the top, that's not going to sit well with me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'm not going to be able to obtain, to have my goal completed because you're not going to be able to eat it. And here's something else. I happen to not eat meat. So that picture is problematic for me as well. So if we think about our dinner party, there might be somebody who can't have gluten, so that would be a problem. Amy's already showed us that she's that middle person, that lactose intolerant. And then I've already self-disclosed that I'm the last person, the vegetarian. So I've got a problem. But what if I gave choices? What if I gave a proactive menu design, what you see there, that every person that came to my house could decide what he or she puts on the plate? I personally love choices. I love the power of getting to choose. And so we want to do this for our dinner party analogy as well, and take that into our classrooms as well, that we provide choices for students. And let me just mention before we move on, the choice is not the same as variety. So if you came to my house and on Monday I had that lovely spaghetti, Amy still got a problem because I see a bunch of cheese on top of there. And if some of you can't have gluten, you'd have a problem with that too. So that means on Monday, you're going to go hungry. And what's on Friday, I would have a problem with, and Amy would too. So we want to be careful that just providing variety is not enough. We need to give choices. We need to allow our learners to choose the learning, that environment and the resources that work the best for each learner. All right. Take it away, Amy.
Thank you. So let's talk about this again in the context of you as an individual. So we've talked about the dinner party and making sure that when we're preparing our classrooms that we are as considerate as we would be of our colleagues when we're having a dinner party. But let's look at variability in the contextual element. So what CAST, our experts for UDL, have told us is that they divide responses to situations into 4 different categories. You're either a North, you like to take action, try things, plunge in. You're an East, you like to look at the big picture and the possibilities before acting. You're a South, you like to consider everyone's feelings and hear all voices before acting. Or you're a West, you like to know the who, the when, the what, the where, and then you'll take your action. I also want you to understand that when you look at variability in these 4 different realms, you're really looking at a particular situation. And so when you think about how you react to your classroom, might be different than how you react to a personal situation, or might be different to how you react with your family. But variability helps you understand that you too don't treat every situation the same, and you too fluctuate the way in which you react. So let's give a little example here. So a scenario would be that you're planning a party for your friend's birthday. So let's think about that pre-COVID. You could have been a plunge in, you could have been a look at the big picture. You might want to consider people's feelings, especially if you're looking at, say, for example, I have 2 boys, so looking at my children's party, did I invite the friends? Is somebody going to be offended? Things like that. Or you're paying attention to the details. You want to make sure that you have a theme and that everything coordinates and that the pink plates match the blue plates, all of that. But now, in the era of COVID, that planning a dinner party, again, might shift the way in which you look at it. So understand that these contextualizations of variability do shift depending on the situation. So if you used to be, Sarah used to be a plunge in. She's going to invite everybody over. We're all going to have a great dinner party. We're going to have Mexican lasagna. We're handled. She might now consider everyone's feelings and say, maybe if someone has been exposed to COVID, maybe if someone has a pre-existing condition, maybe we need to consider people's feelings on how and when and where we hold this best friend's party that we're discussing. Maybe it's an outside party now where before it was going to be in her home. So all of those things do play a role, and the situation modifies the variability or the way in which you approach that situation. You might not care as much if you were a detailed person before. You might not care as much, or Sarah might not care as much if her top hats all match the silverware, but now she's more considerate of someone's feelings in the era of COVID, whereas before she really wanted to make sure it was all coordinated and had a theme and we were all gonna, have a fiesta. So I want you to consider that also as you're planning your coursework. What is different? What is something that's new as you're looking at your classroom that right now is either in person, online, or a combination of the two? And what you might want to be, you might have been a plunge-inner, a north person, and now you're really looking at that big picture, the east. What are we going to do at the end of the semester? What are the goals of the project? So we just gave you one scenario today. There's some more of the fun things to look at, but I do want you to think about that the idea of variability is really contextual to the situation and to the person. So UDL core concepts, the one thing I want you to walk away from today, if you don't walk away with anything else, is that variability is the norm. There is no normal. I'm going to tell a story. My 11-year-old the other day, his teacher asked the class, come on, can't you all just act normal? And they're actually in person right now. And he said, I'm sorry, miss, and I won't disclose names, there is no normal. We all act the way we act because variability is the norm. So possibly he's been listening to too many of my sessions this summer, but at the same time, it does ring true. There is no normal. There is no one size fits all. And if you think about that in life, you understand that. So think about the way in which we look at variability in our cars. If you get into your car, you adjust your seat, you move your seat, you move your steering wheel. There's all these things that are a variability. But when you look at your classroom, do you allow that same variability in the application of your content? So just something to think about. So I don't want to make you all anxious because you're like, wait a second, if variability is the norm, how can we plan a curriculum? How can we plan for the classroom? How can we know what's happening? I'm just going to throw in my hat and I'm done. And I don't think that's the way to really look at variability, because variability is predictable. In learning, it can be designed for. Yay, we're all excited now. Because if you look at your classroom, there's certain things, accommodations, modifications, things that you can do to your curriculum that allow you to plan for variability, to plan for accommodating students. And some of the things that we're going to talk about are accommodations that in today's day and age are something that you could ask for as accommodation. So for example, a note taker for a class. But if you provided those notes to all the students in the class, that's universal design. That's not doing something individual for one student, that's something doing an accommodation for all students that improves all students' engagement with the material. Anything you want to add there, Sarah?
No, I think you did a great job of that. I think, but well, I said no, and now I'm going to add something because you gave me access, you gave me a choice to do that. So I just want to kind of add to what you already said, that universal design for learning is thinking about how to provide the easiest, most accessible pathway for our learners. And that just kind of puts it in a whole nother box. We, as you just said about adjusting your car, where we sit, if we sit or stand, I mean, how loud or how soft the information is, closed captioning, those are all parts that just make learning easier for us. So you're going to tell us though about UDL and the learning brain. So let me let you get to.
I am, but I also want to go back to your point earlier about the barrier is the environment, not the student. So I think that's really important. That I'll use myself as an example. I am not a tall person. I am 5'6", so I guess I'm what they call average height. But when I get into my car, I have very short legs. So when I get into my car, I have to move the seat forward. If we didn't design for variability, if we didn't design for accommodations for individuals, I would not be able to touch the pedals in my car. And that is something, you know, as children, I know any of you out there who have kids, and I know some of you do, think about how my son, when he was younger, he would mow the grass, and we had to put books up so he could sit on the seat to mow the grass. That's an accommodation. Those are things that we do. But again, the barrier is the environment. It wasn't that he couldn't mow the grass. It wasn't that he didn't understand how to run the lawnmower. His legs were just shorter than they needed to be. Or in my case, my legs are shorter than I need to drive my car. So I want you to keep that in mind. What in the environment can we address that helps the student succeed? So UDL and the learning brain, we're going to look at 3 different areas: the strategic area, the affective area, and the recognition area. And you're like, wow, that's lovely big words, and we're at a conference and we've been here in a little bit, and I want to explain it kind of in a little bit more simpler terms, which is the how, the why, and the what, right? So we know there's no average brain. We know the brain has incredible plasticity, and we've learned about the plasticity of the brain now for many years through neuroscience. And we look back, and I'm a CTE girl, so when we look back at Perkins 3 and 4, we talked about increasing plasticity and how do we assist women in being more active in STEM occupations is through making those neurological connections. So allowing young girls to play with Legos increases plasticity around spatial reasoning and all of that great research that was done by Lise Elliott. This research on UDL goes hand in hand with that research. So the idea of the strategic network, the how do we approach something? The effective network, the why. Answering that question for us is, why are we doing these things? Why do I need to move my seat in my car? Why do we need to put books on the lawnmower? Things of that nature. And then the goal drives the neurosystem, the what. What are we going to be doing? What is the end goal? And so when we look at universal design and the learning brain, these are these 3 separate sections of the brain that are all coming together to be more successful if we apply universal design. We can talk about the strategic networks, we can talk about the effective networks, and we can talk about the recognition networks, and we recognize, okay, what's the problem? I can't touch my pedals. Why can't I touch my pedals? Because I'm vertically challenged and my legs are short. How can I do something to make me touch my pedals? I move my seat forward. But let's look at that in the classroom application. I have a hearing impairment and I'm in a big lecture hall and the professor is standing at the front of the room. Let's go pre-COVID. I don't know why I put that in air quotes because it was a thing pre-COVID. But in a lecture hall, I can't hear. So what is an accommodation that I could use or that I would do? So what's the issue? The issue is I have a hearing impairment. Why do I have a hearing impairment? Maybe I listened to too much loud music as a kid. I don't know, but I have a hearing impairment. So the why is irrelevant in that situation, but the how can I have an accommodation? Possibly the professor can share their notes. Possibly the professor can put their lecture up on a big screen, things like that. So these are all little things that you can do, but again, why do it for one student when you could do it for all the students? Because some people disclose and some people don't disclose. So universal design is really a way to accommodate and improve all learners. We'll go to the next slide.
If I could just add, Amy, it's also a way to empower all of us, because I love the thought of that if we can help our learners to also understand that that the barrier is in the environment instead of them. Think about, for all of you educators, how that changes the learning process for our students. If our students, everywhere they go, think about how can I make this work the best for me? If I understand what works for me, if I understand what my barriers are, that's going to give them independence and success in so many places in life, not just in our classrooms, but in the world of work, in their daily life, all of those types of places. And the goals drive the nervous system that Amy already shared with you. A model of that is before asking you to think about, to pay attention to something in particular, helps your brain to go, okay, that's important. And so again, with our students, making sure that they understand what their goals are, what they're trying to get out of this particular learning session or this course or this semester, whatever, however you want to phrase that, is going to be a game changer for sure. And starting with the why, Amy talked about the why, thinking about now and how. Understanding why this is important changes everything. Understanding why I need this information. So that old question, is it, you know, how am I going to use this in the future? Why is this important? I got the how and the why both in there, is essential. And just because it's going to be on a test is not a good enough answer. The answer for us is we need to make those connections for our students, and we need to explicitly make those connections. You're going to need this because it's going to be important in this job. Again, I'll come back to contextualization. And contextualization is very explicit whenever you're in a bridge or an ICAPS program, but we need to do a job of contextualizing in every single class, helping our students understand the importance of the information that we're sharing, how it's going to help them achieve their goals, how it can be used, understanding all of those to be able to think about the importance. It's going to help students to retain, to come back. If I think that this is important stuff, I'm going to be back. If I don't think it's important, maybe not so much. We all know that our students oftentimes have barriers outside the classroom of life. Sometimes life throws them a curveball. So we need to make sure that students are very clear about why this is important and why the information that you're sharing with them is going to be used in their lives. Also thinking about equity for courses at a distance, because that is the world that we're living in right now. So all students need equitable access to digital and print materials and technologies used to deliver instruction remotely. That's one sentence, but think about what that actually means. So for our programs, we need to think about, do our students have Wi-Fi access? Do they have devices that they can use? And if they have there's some reason that the technology is in their way, we need to design for print materials. We need to give options. Even in this time of remote learning and virtual learning, we need to make sure that there are options for students if that, for whatever reason, is not working for them. We need thoughtful approaches to support all students as learning within a new model for teaching and learning. So let me back up and think about this for a minute. Our world has been turned upside down. Everybody has had to learn some new ways of doing things. So as we think about universal design for learning, for our students, for our learners, think about for yourself. Over the last few months, have you ever been frustrated because you didn't get a choice? Because your old way of doing things, what felt good and comfortable for you, suddenly was taken away and you had to do something in a different way? If you have that feeling, if you can conjure that feeling back up for you, then you understand why it's so important that we give choices to our students and that we have equitable access for students. Because for our students also, it's not that they're not able to learn, it's that they need to get information in a way that works for them. And in these times, if we are not providing in this particular case, if we're not providing virtual access, then we're probably shutting off the opportunities for them to learn. As educators, we've got our education institutions that need to have a plan, and hopefully they are. We've been this far enough that you can deliver courses online. But then as educators, we need to think about, even within the parameters of offering the virtual classroom, are we making sure that we're giving different types of choices for our students as we move forward? So maybe for some learners, having more videos that are access to them, more autonomy that they can go and try different learning resources on their own. Or maybe I like the fact that I can have a recorded lecture and I can go back and listen to it, or stop and go back and listen to something that somebody said and I didn't catch it the first time because it was a lot of information. Those are ways that gives me the power, gives me as a learner the choice to use and engage with the information that's being shared with me.
Sarah, before we move on, I do want to say that this whole conference is really based around universal design. So if you didn't know, Sarah and I are both members of the planning team for this conference, and our centers have been active planners of this conference. And every year for the last 18 years, the Career and Tech Ed area has had the opportunity to attend the Forum for Excellence. Every year in September, it's become kind of consistent in our culture. About 5-6 years ago, we invited adult ed, so now we party together. But for 6 years now, we've all been partying together, and we've all been seeing each other and doing all the great things and sharing great information. And so when we were faced with COVID and when we looked at this conference, we had to say, okay, what is possible and what is not possible? Is it possible to bring 400 people together in Bloomington, Illinois in September? No, not possible. governor's guidelines, all of the CDC recommendations. We want the safety and the health of every individual that's attending to be our first priority. But we want you to get good content. We want you to be engaged. We want you to have the Forum for Excellence experience that you've become to know and it's been a part of your culture. So just think about it like that. If you're thinking, oh, I don't really see how universal design comes in, you're engaging in it right now. You're engaging in it right now. When you came in, you should have been able to get the handouts from the session. You can see the recordings. And then in addition to that, not only are we presenting the information to you, but all of the sessions are being recorded. So if you wanted to attend this session and you're here with us now, but there's another session you want to check out, universal design is being implemented. You can go and watch any of those sessions, and we're also going to archive them. So we're making this conference as accessible as possible, following that guidance of universal design. So just wanted you to see just a little sample of it in practice there. Sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you, Amy. And you know, if I could just add on to what you said, we have talked for numerous years about, because we've had that comment from conference attendees, oh, there were 2 or 3 sessions at the same time that I wanted to see. Mm-hmm. So we have literally sat in meetings and talked about how to solve that problem. And now it's solved. And I don't think this is something that, regardless of how we do conferences in the future, I believe we will probably record all of them and make them accessible to people, because we've got, okay, this is really good. This is a good outcome, that people can get all the information instead of just one piece of information. So, and that's a great example of how universal design is good for everybody. We sometimes think of special designs as for people with disabilities, and yes, it is. But it's also, we all benefit from that. So let's look at, for just a minute, a slide on learners and workers with disabilities, because there are a lot of learners out there for us that have some type of disability. Amy alluded to before that they may disclose or may not, but 19% of undergraduate students reported a disability. And so 26% of those undergraduate students were veterans, 23% were 30 or over, and 21 to 24 of those who are independent. So we have a lot of learners out there and a lot of workers also, because 35% of working age people with disabilities are employed. And there you see that came from the US Department of Education, National Center for Education Statistics, and the Digest of Education Statistics. So I just want to mention again that it's very helpful if we design for variability, because then we're going to be designing for all the folks that you see that are represented on this screen as well. So let's go back to UDL, and we had the how and the why and the what. So engagement, we want to have provide multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. But within that, we also want to have the different layers of the UDL guidelines. So we want to make sure that we create access. We've already talked a little bit about making sure that there's access. Maybe we use assistive technology. The cool thing is that we live in an age where assistive technology is so layered into most of our technology that we don't even realize that's part of UDL. One of the things I do with my cell phone is I make the font larger because that's easier for me to see. That doesn't mean that I have a disability, but I do have aging eyes. And so it's just great that that is creating access for me. But in addition to that, we also need to make sure that we build learning skills. We need to make sure that we talk more than just about what people are supposed to learn, but how they can get that information, how they learn best. We need to layer in the process, not just the content. We can't assume that our students just all come to us with all these great learning skills. So if we make learning meaningful, if we make those applications, if we help them to see how it relates to what they already know, if we make those connections, then we're going to build learning skills for our students, and that's very important. And then we also want to build independence, and I've mentioned that a couple of times, helping our students ensure success, not only in our classrooms, but then in work and in life. If I internalize my learning behaviors, if I know as a learner what my barriers are, what my strengths are, and how I can build on those, then I am going to build in independence. That way, when I get to a job and I have a boss who maybe I'm not getting the information, I feel empowered to go up and say, you know, it really helps me if I have written directions. And if I have written directions, I'm just gonna do a great job for you every day. Is there any way that I could take notes as you during the morning meeting, or maybe you could provide me with, you know, a quick, those are the kinds of things that help to make sure that we are building independence in our students.
So let's look for a second on how we can use UDL on campuses and in our classrooms and in our work. The first point here is UDL on campus. So this is a resource, and I'm throwing it in the chat right now. I want you to look at, and it's udloncampus.cast.org. It's a guide to help stakeholders implement UDL practices in higher education. I know some of you are adult education, you're like, whoa, I don't always see myself in that box, but really the practices are phenomenal. Course design, media, materials, accessibility, and policy. So looking at what has been done for UDL on campus, there's some great resources as well as videos there. I do want you to think about within your curriculum, what you can do to accommodate your students and what are those things. So we're going to be challenging you as we move forward. You know, what's that one thing that you can do differently now that you've considered universal design? So we have a couple more resources for you. The big impact that we're talking about is creating access. So whether your class is virtual or in person, we want you to have accessibility for students. We want to create access points and opportunities for students. So let's talk about some ways in which we can do that. The access layer, and again, in your handout, which you have this diagram in the back, sorry, my hand there, you have the diagram in the back as your handout. Access is that middle layer. So providing options for language and symbols, clarifying vocabulary. We're CTE, right? A lot of us are either working with ICAPS programs and IET programs and bridge programs. Sarah talked about the bridge programs and contextualizing curriculum. What is the first thing we need to do to contextualize curriculum? Vocabulary. Make sure that everyone understands what everything means. And I don't know about you, but I did not learn in my third, fourth, or even high school age what POS meant, what CLNA meant, what CTE meant, and also in different circles, it means different things. So providing options for language and symbols, clarifying vocabulary. This is what we're playing with. This is leveling the playing field. You want to do that for all students. If you assume that students come in understanding healthcare terms and they come out of IT, no, totally different things. I work in education, my husband works in IT. We have the same letter combinations, but the acronym means totally different things. So we want to be doing that. You want to talk about systems and structure and how that works. So allowing those symbols and systematic and structure and support for decoding text and where you kind of move those things in. What you want to do is be sure that you're promoting understanding across all languages. So one of the things that we've talked about with access is looking at both nonverbal cues and verbal cues. So how could this look in your classroom? Maybe you're somebody who listens to the recording and can pick everything up. Maybe you're somebody who talks fast, guilty, and you don't necessarily listen to everything, but you want the highlighted efforts, those big terms in the class, to be highlighted. So as a presenter, as a teacher, when you're presenting materials, are you emphasizing, maybe with bold, maybe with color, the words or the terms that you want your students to get? That's universal design, looking at providing access, providing expression and communication, looking at encouraging effort and continuation of persistence. In addition to that, how many of you have tests that you take at the end of your class? Remember that? I remember in high school, yes, I'm old, I remember in high school that we took a comprehensive test. So at the end of the class, took a comprehensive test. By college, and really now with my children, that's not commonplace. And that's kind of the application of universal design. Instead of saying that one test gauges your complete success, gauges your knowledge and digestion of information, give them hands-on activities, give them presentation activities, give them a test. Because if you look at the multiple means for measuring success, then you're providing access. You're providing access for students to be able to demonstrate the ways in which they capture and digest knowledge. So accessibility as defined by the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights is a person with a disability can acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, enjoy the same services in equitable, effective, equitable, integrated manner with substantial equivalent ease of use. That's a lot, right? You're like, wow, nice job reading. But the point is, a person with a disability can acquire and engage and enjoy equitably. Let's take those points out. So just look at that. And that's what we really want for our classrooms. That's what we really want for our teachers. Most of you are post-secondary or adult education engaged individuals, or that's where you check that box that you're here at the forum today. With post-secondary, our students don't have to disclose. With adult education, we encourage, again, both sides, we encourage to disclose, but they don't have to disclose. So you could have a student in your class, in your program, who possibly is on the spectrum. You can have a student who has dyslexia, who has some kind of cognitive disability. I mean, obviously, if they're in a wheelchair, that's a no-brainer. Yes, they have a need an accommodation. But there's a lot of accommodations, and I would want to argue even more accommodations that are needed for our individuals who have cognitive disabilities. So how do we ensure that a student can acquire the same information, engage in the same interaction? So what are those interactions, and are you limiting them by either physical or some kind of discretion, and enjoy the same services and have an equally effective, equally integrated experience? So just think about that as we're looking at this. So what can you do? What does this look like? And oh my gosh, look at how I bolded the things I want you to look at and put them in pretty colors. I want you to find out what your institution's policy and practices are around accessibility and accommodations as courses move online. And if they haven't moved online, that's fantastic. But you also just look at it. That's some of your homework. You can look at what your institutional policy and practices are. Many of you were probably involved in writing those policies and practices over the summer, because I know we've had a big response in the last few months. I want you to share your policies and resources with your students and add them to your syllabus if it's online. So one of the things that we do, I teach at ISU often, and one of the things that we do is we have disability services information. It's been on my syllabus since day one back in 2001. And so for 19 years now, I have shared with my students where they can find resources if they need accommodations. The third thing I want you to do, or I'm encouraging you to do, is I want you to inform yourself about where students can go for help and share that information with the students early and often. So those two kind of go together. Where do they go for help? What are the policies and resources that are available? And in the community colleges, you guys have a ton of resources, a ton. So please share those with your students, because a lot of them don't spend time on campus walking around asking questions. So you're their point of contact. So please go in and do that. And then build your own and your students' best practices. So what are you going to do in your classroom? Simple things that you can do, or simple things you can ask your faculty to do, is put your syllabus out ahead of time. Ever shown up for a class and they hand you the syllabus on the day of? Is that fun for you? Not so much. So share your syllabus ahead of time. That's one thing you can do. When you're lecturing, turn on closed captioning. Allow them to have closed captioning. Sarah's going to give us some hints on that. But in addition to that, share your notes, create notes. In the virtual platforms that many of us are using, you can turn on transcription. And so if you're lecturing online, even if you're not able to close caption, you can share your notes. You can share your transcription of that encounter, or you can share the recording. So just think about ways that you can implement this stuff starting today or tomorrow. So how can you get help around accessibility? Here are some things and tips for you in your classroom. In the chat, I'd like you to share something that you know, or something that you would like to know about how to address accessibility for your students, if a course is moved online or if a course has moved online. You can also share these via email. If you don't have Sarah and I's email, we will share that in the chat as well. Jot them down, share them with your community once the email is over. So when Sarah went back and she talked about the ways in which you can engage through the chat, you can engage through your notes, or maybe you're sitting in a room together, 6 feet apart, and you can engage and have that conversation there. But think about how you can help students become more accessible. And then this is my favorite acronym, well, this week anyway, is POUR. And when you're looking at moving students online, when you're looking at ways to implement universal design, and when you're looking at how to be the most accessible, we want you to pour. We want you to be perceivable. So can they see what you're wanting to do? Are you perceivable? Operable. Do your students have the technology to do the task which you are asking them to do? Understandable. Do your students understand the information? They understand what the directive is and they know what you're asking them to do? And is it robust? We are not asking, and I want this to be very clear, we are not ever saying water down your curriculum. We are not ever saying, I want you to change the robust curriculum that you have. What we're saying is make it accessible, make it perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Can everyone see and hear your content? And how do you include alternative text or visual captions, transcripts of videos, things of that nature? And see, what a great idea. So that should have been your aha moment for today.
Oh, that might have been where they gasped. Yes, now.
There we go.
But, you know, to Amy's point, how often in your life, and I bet you can come up with a time that you misheard a word, or you thought that you heard something and it was incorrect, and it changes everything. And until we get that clarification, we're going to be confused. So that happens with our students also. And videos are a powerful medium for conveying information. It's a great way to engage our students, to provide multiple means of engagement and multiple means of representation, because they can gather that information. Hopefully it's something that is fun, that's informative. It is a different way. Sometimes if you hear the same voice, you tend to tune out. So providing videos can be very powerful. But it also can be a problem if people are not able to access and be able to understand. Maybe the English is not their first language, maybe they have some type of a disability, or maybe they just have poor audio feed. So we want to think about making sure that there's good closed captioning for our students. And the word good was key in that sentence, because I'm gonna take you through a little scenario, and it's a physics lecture, and the format is video, and the instructor video records a lecture and uploads it to the school's YouTube channel for students to use. So it sounds very accessible, sounds like it's great, and he probably had the best of all intentions, like all of us as educators. So Amy and I want to make sure that you understand, though, that although YouTube has some very nice automatic closed captioning that gets most of it right, it doesn't mean that it gets it all right. Because first of all, he could post it with no captions, and that really limits the accessibility. Once again, when you're talking about physics, you're talking about some pretty complex language. So having the closed captioning does make it more accessible, because then students, even if English is my first language, even if I don't have any type of disability, it's going to help me to be able to engage with the material more deeply. So first of all, but let's say that we do turn on the automatic closed captioning on YouTube. And this is what you get to. So I don't know if this sounds like physics to you or not, but the professor at one point seems to say, stop. So again, it seems like it's trying to make a romaine arrest rather. What he's actually saying is that it's going to remain at rest. He said an object is at rest, so it's going to remain at rest, is what he's saying. But the closed captioning didn't quite pick it up quite right. But the good news for you, for all of us, is that we can edit on there. So we can manage those subtitles. So as Amy said, you can provide all of the notes to students, but you also can go back and take the closed captioning, which is probably 80 to 90% right. But instead of romaine arrest, we can say it's going to remain at rest, which will change everything. So we need to make sure that we take that final step. The good news is it's a pretty simple process to edit subtitles on YouTube. There's also another feature for you, is an audio description. We can import scripts, we can transcribe in the captioning area. It gives you a lot of options. It also gives you the option to add post-production. So we could go back, like Amy and I could go back after we record this and say, the the room looked like this, and there were this many people in the room. They were distanced 6 feet. They were wearing masks. They were amazed and broke into spontaneous applause when Amy told them this. So basically setting the stage for who's in the room, what the space looks like, what are people's expressions. And you may have seen that on some closed captioning before, because it tells you what's happening in the room. Because here's the thing, we gather information in more ways than just the audio or even the reading, by what the room is like, by the expression of the people there, there's a lot of other information that can help us to gain information and to learn.
I want to go through some resources, and I also want to add just one thing to what Sarah just said. We can also create barriers by the room. So I am self-diagnosed audio distracted. So and I've learned that a lot working from home over the last 6 months, if my husband has ESPN out in the family room in his workspace, and I am trying to focus on something back in the home office in my workspace, I have to close the door because I cannot focus when they're yelling about all the fun stuff on ESPN. So think about that in your environment as well. And also think about that for your students. How are their environments impacting their ability to digest and access information? Here are some great resources that I wanted to share with you. So I'm also putting all these in the chat right now. The first is a video about universal design at McGill University. Fabulous video. It is about 10 minutes, but it does go into all the different ways in which they used it to implement throughout their entire university. So exciting stuff. Next bullet there is free UDL resources and tips. That is all 3 resources on universal design. So if you're looking at, you're excited, you're charged up, you're on the Sarah and Amy bandwagon now with UDL, where do I go to get my hands on some great resources? That's your link. The last thing there is Universal Design for Learning in Post-Secondary Education. It's a reflection on principles and their application. This was published in the Journal for Post-Secondary Education and Disability. It was published in 2006, so I understand you're saying, wow, that's 13 years old. That's a little old for a resource. Great resource, though. It really is still applicable, and really, as we're looking at the implications and the implementation of universal design, it really is a good read. So I do encourage you to check that one out as well. And then a couple little things as we wrap up. I want you to take away these last few thoughts. Again, if you take nothing else away, know that UDL is not a checklist. It's infused UDL based on your goals, but UDL is not a checklist. You're not going to find a checklist online. Sarah's not going to hand one out that if I do X, Y, and Z or A, B, C, woohoo, I've achieved universal design. It's small little changes that make a big difference. I challenge you to teach students how to learn, not just what to learn. And that is so important right now because we are engaging with students so differently, and all of us are a little out of our comfort zone. So I really encourage you to think about how we learn in a virtual environment and not just what we learn. And also those of you who are in CTE, how do we teach labs? How do we teach things like welding, or at least some of the parts of welding, in a virtual setting? I was one you learn by doing, and so I don't have a welding TIG out there, so I'm going to have to look at how I can do that. But think about that. Teach students how to learn, not just what to learn. UDL varies in every context. So again, back to the dinner party, back to the scenario of the birthday party. And so think about how your variability is going to change as your situation changes. Small changes can make a big difference. And I want to say that again, small changes can make a big difference. Think about the ways in which we see UDL. We talked about the car. If you look at any ergonomic chair, any kind of ergonomic, I like to cook. You saw that on the app. So any ergonomic mixing bowl or anything, utensil that I'm using, there's actually a hammer now that you can use and not get tennis elbow. So there's a special ergonomically designed hammer to alleviate tennis elbow. And if you are being very crafty over COVID, as my husband is, we've built a lot of things, he needs that hammer. I need to invest in that for him. And then our last closing slide there is Illinois' definition for universal design. It is an approach, a scientific framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all by setting clear, rigorous goals, anticipating barriers, and proactively designing to minimize those barriers. So I want you to really, that's what universal design is. It's a scientific framework to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all. All is very important. So in the chat box, I want you to tell me, or tell us, what is your takeaway? What is one thing that you are going to walk out of this session with? And whether walking out means into your living room or walking out means to the bathroom, doesn't matter. What is one takeaway that you have? And what is one question you have? So go ahead and post those in the chat. We're going to throw up this last page, which is our universal design resource page. And we will answer your questions and engage with you in the chat.
Thanks,
Thank
Amy.
you.
And if I could just mention before we go on to questions is there's going to be a ton of additional training coming up in the near future on equity, on UDL. So be sure and look for that. There'll be a lot of opportunities for us to be able to get together and talk more about how to infuse UDL in your classroom.